This is Audiovisual Lecture 3, Part 2. We're talking about lift and Bernoulli's principle and pressure differences that are what cause the wing to actually rise. So you have a lower pressure on top and a higher pressure on the bottom, which creates a void, if you will, above the wing for it to go up. It's the same thing that causes a dime on the ground to end up in the bag of your vacuum cleaner is because there's a lower pressure in the vacuum than there is on the ground around the dime. So the dime goes up into the area of low pressure because highs go to lows as a concept of physics. Voids will be filled by a vacuum, will seek to be filled. So you have a lower pressure in the vacuum cleaner, the dime's going to end up in the vacuum cleaner. Same thing with a bottle of water. As you go upwards in the atmosphere, there's a certain amount of pressure in the water bottle that's equal to the air around you when you put the cap on it. Now as you start to go up, there's less air pressure, so there's lower air pressure the higher up in the atmosphere you go, which is why the water bottle starts to swell. It's not because it's exploding, it's because it's seeking to fill the area of lower pressure around it. Because it can't get out of the bottle, that's what actually causes it to swell. So that, according to Bernoulli's principle, that's the portion that explains part of why a wing flies. Now, a lot of people struggle with the idea of accepting that a wing is being sucked up into the air. And that's really not a good way to think about it, because that's in a purely scientific sense what is happening. But in the more realistic sense, another very famous text describes it as being the wing is pushing the air down rather than being sucked up into it. So if you think of a surfboard being pulled, not a surfboard, but something being pulled across the water, it's sort of riding on top of the water and pushing the water down from its motion across it. That's kind of what's going on with that lower pressure concept. But that's the basic idea, is that there's a lower pressure on top of the wing than there is underneath the wing. And that's because the top of the wing is curved, which means it's a longer distance than the straight side of the bottom of the wing. And if one side has to travel faster than the other to get there at the same time, it's that acceleration that causes the lower pressure. Now, the second part to it is Newton's third law, which is that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So you have what's called relative wind. Now, last week we were talking about one of the terms that I believe we had was a chord line. And the chord line is it's a line drawn through the wing from front to back. So here we are looking at the side of the wing again. And the chord line is just a line that goes from the front of the wing, from the leading edge up here, through the wing to the trailing edge back here. It's an imaginary line, it's not an actual structural part. So Newton's law, action, reaction. So as the wing is being pulled through the air, you have relative wind striking the wing like so. Now if you tilt the wing, so you're rolling down the runway like this, relative wind sitting in the front of the wing, you're creating all kinds of low pressure, and then you pull back on the stick or the control wheel and you raise the wing like so, to where now the nose has pitched up and now the wind is striking the bottom of the wing more. So here is the action and there's the reaction. As the air strikes the wing, it's pushing it up into that area of low pressure. And that difference between the relative wind and the chord line is the angle of attack. So this action right here, that's your relative wind, your wind relative to the wing, versus relative to the chord line, and that angle right there is your angle of attack. So as your angle of attack is increased, you're getting more of this action-reaction. Now, as we talked about earlier, you have that induced drag, which is why your hand doesn't go directly up. It's the same reason why the wing doesn't just pop straight up. You have that induced drag. So when the wing is like this, and you're rolling down the runway like so, with the wind hitting the wing like the pen here, there's as little drag as possible, but there's also the least amount of lift. So as you pull back on the stick and you're tilting the wing back like that, you're creating more lift, but with that comes more induced drag, because now look at the total surface area that's striking the air. As you're rolling down the runway, it's just an area about like that. It's just the thickness of the front of the wing. But now as you pull back and you're like so, now you have all the way from here all the way down to here, because the wind is also hitting back to the very trailing edge of the wing. So you have a much larger area of the wing exposed, which is why you have extra drag. That's that induced drag. So just to follow up on that with Newton's law, like we said earlier, this is kind of the actual path that the wing is taking relative to that oncoming air because of that induced drag. And the Principles of Flying Handbook on page 100 with figure 101 explains this pretty much. They've got, I think this is part D of that figure, is that the difference between pure reaction and the actual reaction, that is what is your induced drag. So this chart generally is how Newton's third law figures into making an airplane fly. It's the action of the wind, relative wind hitting the wing, and the reaction of the wing going upwards into that area of low pressure. Okay, now a couple of other concepts that are related to the motion of air across the wing are what are called wingtip vortices. Now, as we said before, there's higher pressure below the wing, and it tends to move outwards from the root of the wing towards the tip of the wing. So we're going to look at the back of an airplane here. This is as you're in your P-51 and you're chasing down a Messerschmitt or something, and you see the very back of the airplane. I'm a artist in my spare time, so not really. So you have the back of the wing here. So you have high pressure below the wing and low pressure above the wing, right? So your high pressure in blue here is going outwards towards the tip of the wing. Now earlier we were talking about how that high pressure tries to fill a void because pressure flows from high to low. So back here, over the whole span of the wing, the thing that's keeping that from happening is the wing itself, because the wing is a solid object. But once that high pressure that's flowing outward from the root to the tip gets to the tip and goes off the edge, it's kind of like walking the plank, there's nothing now to stop that high pressure from rushing up into the area of low pressure up here. So the air is coming like this, up, there's no wing, and it just swirls up and around like that into that area of low pressure. And that swirl just kind of falls like so, like a shooting star downwards as that air mixes. So that's what a wing vortice is that air is coming up here, that area of high pressure. It goes off the tip of the wing and just swirls like that. So it tends to go outwards and downwards in that spiraling motion. A couple of things that go on with that, a couple of important concepts for us are ground effect and winglets. So you'll hear a lot in flight training, and you can experience it a lot more easily than it can be explained. But ground effect is practically, it's kind of like a cushion of air that the airplane can ride on that very close to the runway, usually within a half wingspan or possibly a full wingspan width between the airplane and the ground. So you've just taken off, or you're about to land, and you're very close to the runway. The airplane actually has more lift in that region because of ground effect. And the reason for that, so back to looking behind the airplane, we're now looking at the wing tip. So the high pressure coming off the wingtip starts to swirl, and it comes down. Only the ground is so close. Let's say this is with a Cessna 172. Let's say this is a distance of maybe 15 to 25 feet or so, probably 15 to 20 feet at most, about half a wingspan. You're so close to the ground that swirling vortice, those vortices hit the ground and then bounce back up and hit the bottom of the wing. And the result of that is that it causes an extra form of sort of artificial lift. It's like having a huge fan on the ground that's blowing upwards towards the wing. So those vortices come down off the wing, strike the ground, and bounce back up and hit the bottom of the wing, and that helps support the airplane. So operationally and test question wise, the important thing to remember here is that when you are in ground effect, the airplane will have increased performance as opposed to being out of ground effect. So in ground effect, the performance of the airplane is better than it is out of ground effect because you have that additional force of air helping to support the wing. Now, one downside to wingtip vortices are, there's a couple of downsides to it, one for you and one for whoever's in the airplane that is creating them. The larger the airplane, typically the larger obviously the vortices will be. One disadvantage to them is that they create drag. They add to the induced drag of the airplane by disturbing that airflow. And this is what a winglet is for. So if you've ever ridden on a Boeing product, a winglet will usually go up like this. So we're back behind the wing like we are there, and at the tip of the wing it curves up like that, and it looks really cool, but it's actually performing a function, and that is as that high pressure air is coming out towards the end, it goes off the edge of the wing, and as it tries to curve around, it hits the outside of that winglet, and it can't create the circular motion because the winglet prevents that high pressure air from coming around this way and completing a circle. So it improves the aerodynamic efficiency of the airplane by preventing the formation of these winglets here. And it won't always be a winglet on top. Airbuses usually have a little sort of Star Wars looking thing. It's a much smaller thing, but on the end they'll have one that goes up and a little one that goes down. And it does the same thing, it's just a different design. If you've been on a 737 recently, you'll see that they've got a big one up top and then a little one that sort of comes down on the bottom. But they still do the same thing. As far as these vortices, the actual vortices themselves, when they come off of an airplane, they're called wake turbulence. So if a 747 has just taken off, these vortices are drifting downward from behind the airplane. So if you're in your 172 and you're following a 747, you want to avoid flying through the wake of the 747 because the turbulence caused by those vortices coming off of it are easily going to be enough to turn you upside down or cause significant turbulence for a lighter airplane like that. So those are considerations that you have coming into larger airports and behind larger airplanes. That's something you get into more in ground school as far as avoidance techniques and so forth. All right, well, this concludes part 2 of Audiovisual Lecture 3. There's one more part. We're going to conclude a couple of topics from the reading and go over a couple of things for the week.